Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Dual Boot Diaries. I'm one of your hosts, Adam Patrick Murray.
I'm your other host, Will Smith. Welcome. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, and we're joined by a couple of fine gentlemen from the Cosmic team. First, I'm going to introduce Carl. Carl, please tell me your title over on the Cosmic team and what you do over there.
Well, I'm Carl Richell. I'm the founder and CEO of System76. And I work very closely with the Pop West and Cosmic team, building our operating system, as well as all the other teams at System76 that build our fantastic hardware.
Nice, that's awesome. We're also joined by Jeremy. Jeremy,
hello.
Who are you? What do you do over there?
I'm principal engineer. I lead the team that develops Cosmic, as well as working on firmware, electrical design, drivers, and really anything that we need to do in terms of product engineering.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks again for joining us for this chat. We've got a lot of good questions. We even fielded some questions from our Discord. If you want to go join our Discord, there's a link down in the description. But yeah, let's dive right into it. But let's start a little high level, because I'm the noob of the team, so I kind of need a little bit of backstory. So, Carl, I guess maybe if you can give us a quick little history of System76.
Right. Okay. So System76 is a computer manufacturer. We were founded in 2005 in my basement. And it was kind of the classic story where, I thought there was a gap that wasn't being filled where Linux had reached this point where, even at that time, at least in my mind, I think in a lot of others, the Linux desktop was fantastic. And it was competitive with Microsoft Windows. And I think it was, I don't remember what Apple's operating system was at that time. Maybe it was Mac
like
OS.
Snow Leopard or something like that, probably back then. Yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines. And I felt that the issue was that people didn't have a place to go to actually get Linux computers. So you could buy a Windows computer from Dell or HP or any of the other tier ones, or a lot of system integrators at that point as well. Or you could buy a Mac from Apple and you get their experience. But there was this fantastic operating system that was open source and a very deep ethos around the importance of open source in computing, and that started very early on. And I wanted to bring that experience to people in a way that was much more consumable than download an ISO. I think we were at ISOs at that point. It wasn't 15 floppies, but download an ISO, burn it onto a disk, put it in your drive, install it, hope things work. A lot of times at that point, we had dial-up modems. We had all sorts of weird hardware that, it was very hit or miss whether it was going to work or not. So our job was to find the best distro or Linux operating system that we could, and then fill in all of those gaps so that when someone received a computer, everything just worked, whether it was the hotkeys, that dial-up modem, their networking. And so that's what we set out to do in 2005. Since then, we've grown considerably, and our capabilities have grown, which is what probably the most exciting part. Because I love building products. It's what I enjoy doing day to day. And so today, back then we were using Ubuntu, and we were working with a program from Intel to build laptops and to build our desktops. Today, we do our design and our engineering in-house. We built a factory in Denver, Colorado. Raw sheets of aluminum come in one door. They get cut, they get bent, they get painted. Everything gets assembled. And at the end of the week, this thing that was just a flat piece of metal goes out the door as a complete desktop computer. It's really satisfying to take things that are take raw materials, build them and shape them, and ship a product that customers love. So it's also really special, I think, doing that here in Denver, Colorado. I don't know any other computer manufacturer that's actually doing the manufacturing here in the United States. I think Apple has a factory in Texas that does just their really high-end desktops, but we're building consumer products here in the U.S. that's pretty exciting as well.
That's amazing. At what point did you look around at the OS options and realize you had to roll your own? You made sense to roll your own OS with Pop OS.
Well, early on, it was essentially just me. So it wasn't. We started with Ubuntu, and Ubuntu was a somewhat controversial choice at that time. Controversial in that it was the new kid on the block. RHEL was around forever. OpenSUSE was around forever. But Ubuntu came along, and the first time I used it, whenever you went into root in Linux before, you did like su root, and you would use that account, or you'd log into the root account, and that's when you would do your administrative stuff. Ubuntu didn't have that. They had sudo, and you use sudo in front of all your commands to do administrative stuff. And I didn't know that, and I was using this new Ubuntu operating system. It's like, oh, what is this? I can't do anything. So I just threw it away and started looking at other ones. Well, I went back to it, and there was something written called the Ubuntu Guide, and it was this really nice guide that was maybe, 20 pages or something. And it just kind of did the basics of what it is to use Ubuntu. And once I had walked through that, it just all clicked. And I thought they obviously had hit on something here that was going to be a better desktop experience for users. And so that's what we ended up using. We wanted to use, a lot of people at that time, there were some other people that were shipping Linux, but what they were doing was taking a ThinkPad, and they'll load RHEL for you, and then they'll ship that to you. Or they'll load any number, like a long list of these distributions. I thought for anyone that was used to buying a Windows computer or buying a Mac, coming to a website to buy a computer and having a list of 15 operating systems you could choose between that were all Linux just wasn't going to work. So we wanted to pick just one. And Ubuntu was that one. It also meant that all of our effort to make things work was concentrated into that one distribution. Sometimes issues are at the kernel level, sometimes they're higher up. And when you spread yourself out to a lot of different distributions, it takes a lot more time, and the quality of the product, I think, starts to decline. So long way of getting to your question. After about 15 years of shipping Ubuntu computers, Ubuntu was building the Unity desktop environment. So they were using GNOME before, then they started building Unity, which is very similar to what we were doing now with Cosmic, building our own desktop environment. But as that project went along, it never got to completion, never started shipping. They started out building it for mobile, which I think at that time probably made a lot of sense, but all their users were on desktop, and so the desktop users weren't actually using the stuff that everyone was working on. And ultimately, Mark Shuttleworth over there decided that it was time to kind of cut that project loose. And we were really excited about Unity and what was coming, and just a new desktop experience to ship to our customers. So it was a bit disappointing, but also an opportunity at the same time. Okay. There were, over the years, a lot of small things that our customers were requesting. Tech support is 15 feet away from me, and so we talk all the time, and I talk to the sales team that's 20 feet away all the time. And things like notifications are annoying because they're popping up all the time. Well, let's put Do Not Disturb into the operating system. The aesthetic doesn't feel very bright and appealing, and so let's work on the aesthetic. Our customers wanted full disk encryption out of the box. That wasn't possible to do as an OEM, because if you did full disk encryption, you create an image of it. As an OEM, when we load that image, we have the key. Well, that doesn't work. So we built an installer. That means when you get your computer, as you walk through the initial setup, the key is on your device, and it's private and it's personal. So we were able to start solving problems that our customers had by building Pop OS and taking on that effort. And we had grown to the point where we were able to do it. So the timing just all came together to allow us to start solving those problems. And lo and behold, the things that our customers were asking for tended to be what other people were asking for too. And because of that, I think the popularity of Pop! OS grew pretty dramatically.
That's kind of the open source way, right? Is like you have a problem that you solve for yourself, and then it turns out a bunch of other people have the same problem and need that same problem solved, and then you end up with infinite choice in your operating system, I guess, right?
It's the beauty of it. Not only do you have the power to scratch your own itches and those of the people that you're trying to build something for, but you also get to learn from each other. And so the things that we learn from our customers and our users that are paying us for products, other Linux desktops and distributions can see the things that we're doing and see, well, maybe that makes sense for our users too. Or no, that doesn't make any sense, but our users need this, and so we're going to build that for them. I think that's what makes it special, and not only on like how are you solving problems for your users and your customers, but also on a technical level. Like we reference, as we're building Cosmic, we're referencing Sway and KDE and GNOME and how they do things and how we might do them either in the same way or apply this protocol or build this protocol in the same way or a slightly different way and suggest it upstream with our changes. All of it, it's competitive but collaborative at the same time.
That's awesome. Obviously, you keep. It seems like you keep kind of responding to these needs in the place, and Cosmic is that thing that has been just kind of been worked on for a while. Like I know we're doing this interview because we're approaching the actual release of it. So I mean, how long has it actually been in the process of being put together, or is it more just like an extension of Pop! OS rolled into a desktop environment?
Yeah, well, good to explain that for viewers. So Linux is a full operating system with a kernel and these subsystems that do things for your drivers and your input and all of those things. The desktop experience is everything you feel and see on top of that. So there's GNOME and there's KDE, and those are desktop experiences. Cosmic is the desktop experience we're building, and we're 4 years into it now. And so we've essentially built an operating system from scratch in 4 years.
That seems like I don't have a good sense of how big is the team on this. Like that's the kind of like this seems like a moonshot project for a PC OEM, right? Somebody who's building PCs. This seems like an enormous project for you guys.
It's a dream project, really. It's the kind of thing that you always want to be able to do. Between engineering and QA and design, it's a team of about 10 people that have been building it.
Oh wow! Okay.
And Jeremy, you're the head of that. Did you join System76 just for this project, or have you been at System76 for a bit?
I joined in 2017, and one of the first things that I worked on was the firmware updates, actually, to basically create an automatic system for that. And very quickly got interested in Pop! OS after Ubuntu dropped Unity. And I remember the conversation that I had with Carl where he was asking me, should we do this? Is it insane? And I said, well, we should try. And the next thing, our first release was just taking the Ubuntu ISO and hacking it into a themed version. The second release, 1804, was way more from the ground up. We were building the ISOs from scratch. We had deployed Distanced, which was our new installer, along with the elementary installer, which together allowed for a 2-minute OEM install with full disk encryption, which was at the time faster than anything else I had seen and may still be. Although every time that we have to add little hacks to it and new features, it seems to get slower, and I worry we need to revisit it. Cosmic really came out of an overwhelming desire to apply all the stuff we knew had to be in a desktop environment to every level, rather than having to continuously add more and more patches to something that other entities were building. Whether it's GNOME or Ubuntu, we wanted to seize control and have the ability to replace any part of it. And so starting that process, really, Carl says 4 years. But the initial development was actually just to create extensions that were on top of GNOME Shell. When we started to think about building it from scratch and ditching our dependencies on GNOME Shell, it expanded tremendously, and that was about 2.5 years ago. And we were all in on Rust as a programming language. We had to do things like developing the Toolkit, basically assisting in the Toolkit development almost from nothing. Iced is what we're using as a toolkit. When we first were investigating toolkits, almost none of them had been developed far enough to be used in a desktop environment. But we took Iced and we contributed some things to Iced, like the text rendering stack. Previously, Iced had very simple text rendering. Now it can handle bidirectional, full Unicode text handling with a thing that I wrote called Cosmic Text. We've had to be involved in the Wayland development process. So we have a compositor called Cosmic Comp, and the developer for that, Victoria, on our team is tremendously involved in Wayland protocol development. So we've had many different protocols that have been proposed and following them through to upstreaming and implementation in other compositors as well. Really taking what, at the time, the Wayland and Rust ecosystem in Linux and building it up to where those two new technologies could actually be viable in a desktop environment. It's been a really long process and really tiring.
The thing that seems interesting that drew me to this project and made me has made me follow it over the years, because even before I was running Linux Daily, I was kind of like, oh yeah, the Cosmic folks, those are the crazy people building a desktop environment in Rust. It seemed like you were building for the future instead of the past, right? Like you're right. Wayland only, not X10. You're building in Rust, not C.
Exactly. We were the first desktop environment desktop environment is kind of a loose term, but when I think of desktop environment, I think of GNOME, KDE, LXDE, XFCE. I don't think about window managers paired with things. I think about something that comes with a window manager and applications and just a whole lot of stuff bundled together, rather than an a la carte technique of pick each thing. If you look at that, you could construct a Wayland-only desktop environment using Sway and other pieces earlier, but we were the first integrated desktop environment to consider dropping X11 entirely and only focusing on Wayland. And I think it's been very beneficial because we've been able to develop modular pieces using Wayland protocols. The panels, the docks in the system, for example, they actually launch applets as Wayland clients. So each piece of the panel is another process that's simply an application providing a Wayland window. And that has allowed us to modularize versus other desktop environments that have, for example, JavaScript embedded in the compositor, and that's the way that things are added or removed from the panel.
It's interesting because that approach, a lot of the tiling window compositors ended up with a similar approach that they, I think, handle completely differently. Like the way Neary or Hyperland work with their quick shell, the quick shell environment layers on top. But you don't get the full feature stack of, hey, we're providing our own terminal, we're providing a text editor, we're providing all those applications on top of all that stuff. Which is, it's kind of nice. It feels, I hadn't spent a lot of time with Cosmic before this week, but it feels much more cohesive than, like, I'm a Neary guy right now. I'm using Neary. I love the infinite scrolling tiling manager. It works for my brain, but it doesn't feel cohesive in the way that a GNOME or KDE or Cosmic necessarily do, which I think is especially good for people who are newer to the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. And yes. I think there's a lot of value in Neary. Neary is based on Smithay, so both Cosmic Comp and Neary share the same common code base for implementing Wayland compositors, which is really nice. So when things change in Smithay, they benefit both projects. It's possible in the future we'll allow Neary to be one of the built-in like compositor options, or have some infinite tiling kind of scrollable tiling kind of implementation. The beauty of Cosmic is it is possible to switch out those components. So the compositor is just a component that implements a number of Wayland protocols. And if another compositor implements those protocols, then they are swappable. You can choose. And I hope that with every piece of the design, we are considering things that way. And it was very helpful to drop X11 because it's a whole nother huge level of similar but distinct implementations. If we wanted to do the same thing with the panel, yes, we could have a way of embedding X11 windows inside of the panel, but it would be far more complicated. We'd be more than doubling the code. People don't really know this because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstandings about Wayland, but at the core, it is a far simpler and more efficient protocol than X11 is. And it comes with far fewer dependencies.
How do you handle legacy X11 apps that pop up when people try to run them on Cosmic?
Yeah, with X-Wayland.
Okay. So I guess my next question is, can you explain why Rust for folks who aren't programmers and don't understand why Rust inherently? I feel like all my programmer friends are like, oh man, Rust is really cool. One day I'll make a project in that, and then they never do. But I'm curious, like why you started with Rust and why that was a core part of the project.
Well, for me, Rust has always been interesting. When I first got into Rust, it was in 2015, and this was before the first stable release of Rust. The syntax was very different. Pretty abrasive. And I was coming from C++ at the time, and C++ has insane syntax. So to think that Rust was abrasive must have meant something. But at the time, there were a number of lents that I was trying to put on top of C++ just to make it more sane and to get rid of issues that I kept running into. And my friend sent me a link to the Rust documentation. Hey, look at this language. And the thing that really got my attention was the borrow checker, because what it does is it prevents different pieces of code from changing an object at the same time or without reference to each other. So if, for example, if you delete an element from an array, you should not be still iterating through that array without knowledge that the element has been deleted. So in C++, you can trivially do that and make that mistake, and it ends up resulting in a segmentation fault or potentially in a vulnerability. Out-of-bounds errors still, to this day, cause a significant percentage of security vulnerabilities. With Rust, that is caught. Those kinds of issues are caught. They're either caught during compile time or during runtime. And I think what we're seeing today is Rust is being used tremendously at kind of the interface level. You see companies like Netflix and Cloudflare have changed tremendous amounts of their stack where performance and safety are critical to Rust, but not at the desktop environment level. And I feel like that's just the scope and the money available for those projects. The scope of a desktop environment is tremendous, and the money available for developing new desktop environments or even operating systems is almost non-existent. But we still do see companies like Microsoft are going into Rust for things like font handling. So their font parsing stack is being moved over to Rust. Google is working on font parsing. This is because these are micro programs that are delivered from third parties. You know, a website gives you a font. It actually has programming embedded in it. And the last thing you want to do is expose security vulnerabilities just because you're handling a text on a website. So a lot of the features of Rust prevent vulnerabilities that are easy to introduce in other performant programming languages like C and C++. but without the overhead of a runtime like Go, or the overhead of interpretation like Java or .NET.
Makes more reliable, less crashy. Always sounds good to me. More secure. Yeah. 3 things I love.
Yeah. I actually have a question that I want to get to, which circles back a little bit from Jordan on Bluesky. Asked, do you see a future where Cosmic pushes Smithy to become the standard library for Wayland compositors and effectively ending the fragmentation between Hyperlin, Sway, and GNOME? Or do you think the ecosystems will remain distinct silos?
They will remain distinct. This is more a matter of personalities than technologies.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to get Hyperland, GNOME, and Cosmic to agree on one implementation of a Wayland compositor. I don't want them to either, as Carl is trying to say. It's beneficial to have multiple implementations of things. It's beneficial to have different browser engines that are available and fully functional. It's beneficial to have different operating systems. It's beneficial for humanity to have distinct items. And I think a big part of that, in my mind, comes back to security and reliability. When you have one and only one kind of core technology being used, it's kind of similar to how we do fruits. We have one kind of banana, but we don't just have one species of banana. We have one banana gene, and then we clone it over and over through splicing. It can't even reproduce itself, and we call it the Cavendish, right? But if you have a virus that affects the Cavendish, then the same thing that happened to the prior version of banana will happen to Wayland compositors, okay? If you have a vulnerability, it affects all of them. It's really hard also to develop standards if you have one implementation. Because if you have only one implementation, the standard is not the documentation you write about that implementation. It is that implementation. If there's differences among implementations, then you can create a standard that specifies, okay, they all have to do this. And so I don't want to see a single piece of software take over any part of the ecosystem. I think it's unhealthy, and I think it's really not good for human equality either, because you are saying no one can ever create a different piece of software. This is the one we all have to use and we all have to contribute to. That means if people have better ideas, then instead of allowing them to experiment with those ideas, you're saying, no, give up what you're working on and contribute to this. It is the be-all, end-all in this domain of software.
One of the things that's been really intoxicating coming into Linux after years spent using Windows and Macs is that every time I realize something annoys me a little bit, if I go out and look for it, somebody's created a solution to that minor annoyance, right? And whether it's replacing the entire desktop environment or just changing to a different text editor or a different terminal, there's almost always a solution. And if there isn't, then there's a way for me to figure it out. And without that kind of without the proliferation, you don't get that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we talk about, like, what's the core ethos for Cosmic at this point? Like, what's the kernel of truth at the core of why you embarked on this enormous project?
I think it's to empower people to create things that they want to create, whether it's different experiences. The modular design really aids in that because you can create your own applets. We have, for example, about a dozen custom applets, and hopefully that grows after release, that are available in the Cosmic store. And all you have to do, these are sandboxed, and all you have to do is click a button and they get added to the panel. You can create any experiences you want and craft your operating system how you want. And this is something that has been an issue for us in the past as someone trying to, as an OEM, trying to build experiences, trying to build products on top of other people's code. Everywhere from the Linux kernel up to the GNOME desktop environment, everything that was part of Ubuntu. Us trying to build on top of that, there have been roadblocks along the way that I really want to get rid of with Cosmic. So if you as a distributor of Cosmic want to build a different experience, we have all the tools available for that to be done. You can pick and choose the components you want to have. You can pick and choose the theme you want to have. And hopefully that excites people and starts the kind of thing that I felt back in the early 2000s when I first got into Linux. I was blown away by the number of things out there and how different they were. And these days, I don't really feel it that much. And I want to feel it again. I want the continuous dopamine stream of change.
Yeah, and for users, people that are using they're using Windows or they're using Mac OS on Windows, over time it just becomes more and more bloated or distracting. There are tiles that are flipping or giving you information that aren't in context of what you're doing at the time. Or they force you into their specific idea of how you should use a computer. We don't think that that's required or necessary. We have so we've built Cosmic and designed it in a way that it gets out of your way. It's fast. It can be personalized to the point where your own workflow that you prefer is very easy to set up in settings. Like you were alluding to, like using Neri and using Cosmic, and I love window managers. I think they're awesome and they're a lot of fun to play with. But you have to have a lot of interest to really get in there and modify dot files and figure out how everything works. What we've taken is that entire concept and idea, and we've made it accessible to everyone. So you can move your panels wherever you like. You can put, as Jeremy had said, when you click on the volume icon in Cosmic, that's an application. The battery icon is an application. You can remove that from the panel and move it and put a different application there because that's the one that matters to you. And it's really easy to do in settings. You just choose the panel and add or remove applets and reorganize them. You can have just a single bottom panel if you like that. You can have a top panel and a dock. You can put them on any side. You can have vertical or horizontal workspaces. And all of these things, even though it sounds like a lot, I think with very careful design, we've made it really approachable. So the overall experience takes away all the distraction, makes the experience faster, helps our users be more productive, and makes it more personal. And personalization and productivity go together, because the way that we don't all have to think the same, or our brains don't all have to work the same way, and we can move things around in a way that makes the experience for us what fits or suits us best. And I think that's what the added benefit, what Jeremy's talking about, then that means other people can also build things with what we've made. And when you think about all of the most successful projects in open source, that's their single characteristic. It means that other people can build things with them, like the Linux kernel, Apache, the whole LAMP stack. All of these tools that people could build things with are what makes them so special and valuable to society and humanity. That's what we wanted to do on the desktop environment level.
You wouldn't have stuff like Home Assistant without Docker. You wouldn't have Raspberry Pis without the Linux kernel. Like all of these things are interrelated, and it's empowering.
And there's another thing I think is really important for making those projects scale. There's something Linus always says about the Linux kernel: don't break user space. And what we've seen in desktop environments is that they always break the extensions. They always break the themes. They always break the ways that users achieve those experiences that they want. And with Cosmic, we've really tried from the ground up to design it. After this stable release, we will build on the way you can swap out components and change them. We will not break the ways that are already there. So the way to add things to the panel is so flexible that by adding a single key to a .desktop file that defines an application, you can have that application show up in the panel. Whether the application is an applet or Doom Eternal, it doesn't matter what it is. And I want to expand on that as we go forward. So the things we've built like theming, I feel are very rock solid, and we're very careful to choose what we include. And hopefully we don't ever have to go back, and we don't ever have to break compatibility. So Cosmic is a rolling desktop environment, which I also think is a unique thing. Other desktop environments have stable releases where they define ABI and API compatibility. Like with this new release, we expect you will have to reevaluate the things that you built with the last release. With Cosmic, hopefully at a high level, that isn't the case. At a lower level, the toolkit hasn't really maintained stability, but that is something that we think we can achieve.
I want to circle back real quick. You're confirming that Doom can run in the top panel?
Yes, it can run in any panel, yes.
That's hilarious.
I'm going to go grab my laptop. I'll be right back.
It has to run in Wayland, though. So one way to do that, like get the new UZ Doom and make sure you have the SDL2 variable to force it to use Wayland. The ecosystem is changing so fast, though, and embracing Wayland. Newer Wine versions are able to use Wayland now, whereas previously they were X11 only. I don't know when Steam is going to finally, it's a funny thing. The Steam client itself, they have the Steam Deck and it uses Wayland, but the Steam client uses Electron and only X11. But a lot of the apps can already run in Wayland if you tell them to.
Okay.
Go ahead, Adam.
Real quick, I do want to talk about gaming because, I think, for what we've been seeing is that a lot of people are getting fed up with Windows, or they've had great experiences with the Steam Deck. Either way, there's seems to be that we're seeing a groundswell and a lot of people coming over, and a lot of it is for gaming. So how much did you have to think in mind when developing Cosmic for the gaming crowd? Yeah,
gaming is extremely important, both for me personally and for the Cosmic team. So if I think early on, the focus with the compositor was really just get it to work. And we often had regressions, and those regressions affected games in very unique ways. But as we've reached stability, and as we've gone from introducing features to fixing bugs, games are working extremely well in Cosmic. And I very rarely run into something that would run in another compositor. And of course, with the Steam Deck, the ecosystem has built out. The ecosystem around Wayland compositors on Linux running games has been built out significantly. So the last issue I had was running some games on a specific version of Mesa in my AMD GPU, and it's been fixed. I get very good performance comparative to Windows in Cosmic.
How did you handle the Wayland's lack of a primary monitor problem with games? That's one of the ones I have on my desktop.
We have a primary monitor.
Okay.
We had to force it in. So in Cosmic, there's a setting to add a primary monitor for X-Wayland applications.
Awesome. Yeah. I love you. That's wonderful.
There's a ton of X11 compatibility ones that are specific to gaming. Now, I'm not sure what will happen when Wine by default transitions over to enabling Wayland, but we do have a lot of things in there for scaling and for VRR and for
like to enforce uniform scaling across all the windows on your desktop, so you don't have a huge Steam cursor or whatever. Yeah,
there are different modes. If you have fractional scaling, you can disable it for games and full screen applications, which works really well because those games usually have their own internal scaling. So you don't want to scale them with a compositor. So our default setting is optimized for full screen applications and games to be unscaled, and then for regular applications to receive scaling. And I think it works pretty well. It's one of those things that was really influenced by looking at other desktop environments and how they were doing it and where those things went wrong.
So can I take a slightly different tack here? I'm kind of curious. You're one of the few places I've seen that ships both a tiling compositor and a traditional floating window compositor. And I love that you let people choose on a per workspace basis which way they're going to operate. I think that's a phenomenal feature. How did you come to that? Like where did that start?
It's pretty insane to think about. Yeah, there's and the amount of work that's gone into floating, even though I don't know anybody on the team who actually uses floating by default.
I had to use floating for like 3 months just because I knew no one else was using it and wanted to suss out all the bugs and the experience.
It's amazing what is capable though in floating mode.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I find it pretty painful because I really love tiling, but I still have some floating workspaces. Like I end up putting like Spotify or things like that end up being on a floating workspace while my productivity stuff is on a tiled workspace. But
this was something, we wanted every workspace to be independent, and so its settings are independent. The panels can be configured independently per monitor. The workspace, workspace like selection is per monitor. The workspace tiling is per monitor.
The way I like to think about it is we've built a no compromise experience. We know, and we talk to our customers a lot. We survey our customers a lot. We know when we built tiling into Pop! OS while we were using the GNOME desktop, when we built Pop! Shell, that it was a higher percentage than I expected, but it was 40% used tiling all the time or most of the time.
Wow.
But that means 60% use floating, right? That's a huge number of users. So, and I don't think that there's a reason to force people into a specific style of using the computer. We're not going to attract a lot of users that are coming over from Windows or Mac OS when they can't move their windows around in the way that they were expected to, or they expect to. But it's also not necessary to lock them out of the
that's another thing is everything that you can do with the tiling or in floating mode can be controlled using either the keyboard or the mouse. And so you can kind of tile windows in the floating mode as well. You can stack windows in the floating mode, and you can do it with the mouse by just dragging windows on top of each other. And I use the mouse a lot, but I also use the keyboard a lot. I'm almost always in tiling mode, but there are windows that I always want to float. So it wouldn't be possible in a tiling only window manager. In Sway, I would not be able to drag windows around with the mouse, for example.
Well, I think you all are in a unique spot because you're a hardware OEM as well, right? You are bringing people over from other OSs, and they expect that floating. That floating is the default everywhere else, right? And but at the same time, by making it an option on a workspace by workspace basis, people can flip that switch, and it adds some discoverability to it that goes beyond, hey, I'm going to have to install a Hyperland distro to try this or replace my compositor or whatever. So
yeah, it's very. We found that tiling is a very sticky feature. It's one of those features that once you actually use it and try it and you get used to it, especially if you take a little bit of effort to learn the keyboard shortcuts. It's kind of hard to go back to just a floating window experience. So what we've achieved with Cosmic is the ability for someone to install Pop! OS, use the desktop the way they were expected to use it, and then click a toggle, and now it's all tiled. And as Jimmy was alluding to, there's a consistency between the shortcuts and how things work, both with the keyboard and the mouse, between tiled and floating. So in Cosmic, you can use your mouse to do the same things you would do with the keyboard. Some people are mouse driven, and that's perfectly fine. It's their preference. Some are keyboard driven, but in Cosmic, you can rearrange your windows just grabbing it with the cursor or using the keyboard.
I think most people are both.
One thing.
I think there's different modes that we get into. There are times like if I'm already on the mouse, because browsers really suck at keyboard interactivity, then I'm going to use the mouse to adjust windows. And if I'm already on the keyboard because I'm typing in a code editor, then I'm going to use the keyboard shortcuts. But like we have, for example, focus directions. You can hold super and then press one of the arrows or press one of the Vim direction keys, and it moves focus between windows. If I'm floating or if I'm tiled, it works the same. And I use that all the time. I use it so much that I end up, if I ever go back to Windows, first I have to wait about 3 hours for it to update. Second, I have to go through the OneDrive rejection dialog wizard, whatever. And then finally, I end up hitting Super L and locking the screen about 1 million times because I'm trying to hit Super L as one of the Vim movement keys to move my focus around, and it locks the screen instead. So
but
it's
Jeremy,
pretty ingrained.
Don't you want to sign up for Game Pass? Just in case. Yeah.
It's every time it's do you want the Microsoft Word 360? Do you want OneDrive?
Yeah.
No, I just want to play the one game that doesn't work on Linux yet.
It's wild you say that, because I started with Neri on my laptop, and then I installed it on the desktop, and once I got used to that tiling window manager, it was like going back to Windows feels like moving back in time about 15 years, right? Everything is slower, and we've talked about tiling window managers so much that I get questions from Windows users who are like, hey, how do I get a tiling window manager on Windows? And I'm like, oh, I got bad news for you, buddy.
Run it in WSL.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Probably it will work.
Yeah.
I gotta say, like, it actually broke my brain because I've been using Fedora Cosmic for the past couple weeks, just kind of leading up to this, and I think it was this week Will was like, oh, did you know that it has tiling in it? Because by default it just had the windows, and I was like, I don't want to load a whole nother window manager or anything, and he's like, no, it's just a little toggle, and I was like, whoa, that definitely broke my brain to just be able to toggle it on and off.
Yeah.
So that was pretty awesome. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I do want to get to a couple final questions. Are you okay with time?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So yeah, let's go. There's one from a friend of the show, Lord Slinky Supreme, as to did you guys have an moment where you realized the full scope of what you've gotten yourself into and what you got to go through?
I think we've had multiple.
Sometimes being naive is a good thing.
we always started like I think the first thing we really examined was the compositor. Like, could we build what we want to build on top of another compositor, or even using WL roots? The first thing we tried was on top of Mutter, then WL roots, then okay, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to hire someone working on Smith A, and then they will build a compositor for Cosmic. Then came the toolkit. Are we going to keep using GTK? No, we're gonna use this iced library, which still doesn't handle Arabic text or really anything other than ASCII, and build it up from there. And each one of those places really, and it keeps going on, the things that we end up having to rebuild. Have I told you I'm developing an operating system in Rust?
A kernel or
a whole operating system. It's called Redux OS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the name of that?
Redux OS.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think any software project is impossible, and I think most of them we as software developers are afraid of approaching them, and it's a good thing to be skeptical and say, well, we should try and evaluate the options out there, but at the end of the day, open source is so underfunded, and so a lot of the things that we rely on are developed in hobby time by people who are overworked and underpaid. And the benefit of bringing in a team and having them actually work on something that's purpose built and making it open source and contributing it to the community. I think it's been a very good development for not just for us as a company, but for the overarching open source ecosystem.
Yeah. I was going to say, Rook had a question about this, actually. A friend of the show, Rook, had a question in the Discord about this. And they said, I'd like to hear about your usage of Rust, what they've contributed back to the ecosystem, like the ICE library, et cetera, and how important, useful has Rust been in practice versus... Well, we talked about that a little bit already, but I'm curious. You all have contributed a ton back to Rust when I looked at commits.
Yeah, when we started, it was not possible to build a desktop environment in Rust. It just did all of the groundwork to do so, and wasn't there. And so that's one of the things I think has been exciting about the foundational work we've done. Is not only have we built a desktop environment, but we also built the ability for other people to build applications in Rust that wasn't there before.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of foundational items that were lacking before. You can look at Smithy. Smithy was in development. Again, it was in development, I believe, in hobby time. And we funded a developer. We brought someone in who was already working on Smithy, and we funded them to work full time. And so now that project has grown to the point where it is a competitive compositor library. If not, in my opinion, the best compositor library that exists. And you can see that when you use Cosmic Comp or Neary. You can see there's no compromise. You can use it on top of NVIDIA hardware, AMD, Intel hardware. You can use it on Raspberry Pi. And these are things that we take for granted. But there have been continuous issues with Wayland compositors and different graphics card implementations. Part of that is from the vendors themselves. Part of that is from the compositor libraries. WL Roots used to have a flag that you had to supply if you wanted to run it on top of an NVIDIA GPU. And the flag was something like, I know NVIDIA GPUs suck, but I still want to run my compositor. And we don't have any of that in Cosmic Comp. We just test all the hardware that we want to support, and we want to support all the hardware. And so on the compositor library side, things have grown tremendously, and we have funded that. When you look at libraries like Winit, and we've been using WGPU, and Smithy also has a Smithy client library that is included in Winit, which is a basically window creation and events management library. It has backends for X11 and for Wayland and other window APIs. We have contributed a lot to that to build out, and in part of that to build out ICE and to have support for Wayland features that we use. And then Cosmic Text is something I built out that's now being used by ICE, as well as a number of other toolkits that are written in Rust. And so now they're able to have full comprehensive text support, whereas before they would either have to use FreeType and Harfbuzz, which are written in C. Now they can use, or they would have to have worse text support like ICE used to have. Now they can have full text support, and we can even use that in our firmware applications because that compiles without any dependencies on any system libraries. So it can be used in WASM, in WebAssembly. It can be used in UEFI for firmware. It has no dependencies whatsoever. And those things that we've built out were very nascent when we started, in my opinion. And there have been a lot of community contributors to Cosmic as well that have helped to build things out. And that's another thing that I like to see. A lot of the investment from the community in developing open source toolkits was going to GTK and Qt. Now we're seeing the development of Rust toolkits and actually having them gain traction, and the snowball effect really, they're collecting, and the more they collect, the more they'll be able to collect in terms of contributors, in terms of funding. And I think everyone who has compared the languages knows at a fundamental level, there are things that Rust can do that are important for software development. There are things that it can catch in the compiler phase and at runtime that we want to catch. Now, they may not go all in on Rust after learning this. They may say, well, let's try to develop that in the C ecosystem, and that's fine. But these are things that we need to have. We need to have safer programming languages, and we need them at every level of the software stack.
For folks who don't know, the toolkits, can you give like they basically provide like a window drawing tools, right?
Yeah, if you want to write an application, you have to choose a toolkit, or you have to natively interact with the windowing system. So you might, if you wanted to do X11 using libx11 and libxcb, you can totally do that. It's a complicated process, but it's possible. To make it simpler, you bring in a toolkit, and the toolkit provides you support for widgets and windowing primitives that are really difficult to write, and it gives an abstraction so you can use those on different platforms. So you have the same widgets available, and they work on all the different operating systems you want to support. And a lot of people have been driven to Electron because browsers work everywhere. But the benefit of native toolkits is, of course, performance and memory usage. We're able to do things, I believe, in Cosmic applications that are very difficult to do in other toolkits, because the Cosmic toolkit allows for async Rust to be run. So parallelizing things that are done it becomes really intuitive. And so, for example, the Cosmic App Store is incredibly fast to load because it does all of the parsing of the metadata for applications in threads, and then it parses them into a binary coded serialization format that can be loaded in microseconds. So it may take like 500 milliseconds or even longer to load from XML, but to load from the binary coded format, it can take thousands of times less time. And so if you come in with all of that stuff pre-parsed, it will load up almost instantaneously. If you don't, it will still load up faster than every other app store that I have tested.
Cool.
Nice. All right, a couple more and we get out of here. Infinite, friend of the show, Infinite asks, Cosmic itself is distro independent. You already have a nice integration with Flatpaks. So the question is, do you have any plans to create your own OS tree immutable distro like KDE Linux or GNOME OS? Well,
they can do it.
Yeah, go for it.
You can already get uBlue, which is similar to uBlue has a Cosmic image, and I believe Fedora has a Cosmic Atomic image. So it's already there. If we're going to do it for Pop! OS, we are constantly thinking about what the evolution of Pop! OS looks like, especially now that we have Cosmic. And the unfortunate news is that every time we go deep into what it should look like, we just can't come up with anything that feels exciting and new. And I want to see how things evolve. I want to see what Nix looks like, what Silverblue looks like when Cosmic is stable. I don't know that we've decided anything internally, but it is really interesting to me where these things will end up as they evolve.
We want to, I think, on a long enough timeline, especially with what we're able to do with Cosmic, the type of experience we want to build for an immutable desktop operating system is one where it still feels like Linux.
Yeah.
That's so I think for the folks that really prefer that the current style with device tree or OS tree. I'm thinking of ARM with OS tree. There are limitations that would not work for our customers. It wouldn't really work for us personally, or it feels kind of clunky slow to like rebuild your OS tree and reboot into the new one because you want to add a specific thing at a system level. I think there might be some ways to do this in that you can build an immutable system. Nix is the closest one today, but it also comes with complexities, especially under the hood, that I think we might be able to do things that feels like Linux, but it's immutable. That's our objective, and I think we can do more with the desktop environment to make that possible. It's just a matter of us getting there over time.
Cosmic as a desktop environment is incredibly friendly to being used in immutable distributions. So we follow all of the standard rules. We try to minimize where we store state. The config mechanism itself is developed with this in mind. So the state is separated out from configuration, and the state can be eliminated at any time. And by doing that too, it enables easier tracking of your configuration. So the configuration can be managed by Home Manager in Nix, or it can be managed in a Git repository. Carl and I developed a demo earlier this year where we were just switching up between each other's configs just by git checkout. And then I'd git checkout Carl's branch, and my whole entire desktop would change to look like his. And I could git checkout my branch, and it would change back.
That's really fun.
Yeah, but it's just been a benefit of building on the knowledge that has already been developed of what's required by immutable distributions. And that way they can minimize the amount of work they have to do to integrate Cosmic.
Nice. All right. The last question from the audience is a friend of the show, OnyxSphere. It's an important one. What is the best way to debug and file a bug report against Cosmic? While I understand the work put into Cosmic, where can we submit feature requests such as a spell check in the Cosmic editor? So what's the best way for people to provide feedback?
Well, spell check on the compositor or on the editor is actually triaged and in the feature list, so we do have that one. But Cosmic is it's modular, and so every repository is named after its functionality. So Cosmic Panels, that's the panel in the dock. Cosmic Edit, that's the text editor. So it's pretty easy to go through and search for the part of the desktop you're using and file an issue on it. We go through every issue and we triage them and prioritize them, and so it's a lot of work pulling everything together. But we do want to know. We want to know bugs that are out there. We want to know ideas that people have for features. So don't be shy about posting what's in there, and we'll get to those ideas and those features and work our way through it. Every release of Cosmic will just be better with more things that people want.
I was going to say, you're coming up on 1.0. What's next? What's the next big feature? Next big feature. What are you going to take a vacation? Or are you?
Well, the first thing after a release is response. So it's always the case. We've had a long alpha phase and a pretty long beta phase as well. So I think that we've been able to capture a lot of things that people are going to see. The thing, computing is so broad. The amount of hardware, the amount of things people do with it. Even with our lab that has 20 years of hardware, there are things out there that we won't catch. So it's going to be
also
response.
It's interesting to me, Carl, what I see all the time, which is I will see random people complaining about issues, and then saying, "Well, I'll check in when it's stable," and if you found the issue during the alpha and beta phase and never reported it, when you check in when it's stable, it's still going to be there, buddy. Yeah. So you got to go to GitHub and let us know. There are usually bug fixes will go in before the stable release, and feature requests are being delayed. And with this little time before the stable release, we are assuming everything is all right at this point. Like, it feels to me and to the rest of us really, really close. So when someone says, I don't think it's close, they had better be reporting in a way that we see, not just in a random comment.
Social media posts do not count as bug reports. That is
no, they don't.
Always true.
Because we do want to fix all those issues. So that's the response part, is there are a bunch of people just waiting for it to go stable before trying it. The beta phase is when you're supposed to try it if you expect problems. The stable phase, if you find problems in that you didn't report during the beta phase, it's kind of on you. Because we're all using it full time for the past 2 years.
After that initial kind of response, because there'll be things that we don't catch or haven't caught through this time, and we'll prioritize and take care of those. Then the whole team gets together, and then we build our roadmap for our Epoch 2, our second release. We have lots of ideas. We want to. I think the top thing on my mind for our between Epoch 1 and Epoch 2 is a lot of polish, kind of making the desktop feel organic and alive with animations in better areas, but subtle animations that aren't overwhelming. Desktop wallpaper that's dynamic or animated.
Frosted glass.
Frosted glass. Yeah, we want to have we have designs for frosted glass in the system, like that real beauty and polish to tighten up the experience. That'll probably be our top priority. But we also have a lot of other ones that under the hood technology things like HDR and nightlight support and color. Kind of reworking our color ability inside of the compositor. No shortage of ideas or things we want to work on. We'll just knock them out as they go. And the unique thing about the development process is you won't have to wait for the second release to get those features either. Because Cosmic is continuously released. As soon as HDR is done and through the QA process, it's just released. You don't have to wait until the next release. Same with all the other features we built.
Are you all going to add a bunch of cloud backup or AI crap that people don't want to the system?
Yeah, what's your AI strategy?
No, we're not thinking about AI. I think there might be some places that could be interesting, especially in like accessibility. I think we might have some really interesting places,
like live captions.
Yeah,
right. Live captions, other things like that. There are, I think, there are some neat places. We are working on features that our customers have requested, like the ability to synchronize their settings across computers. But these will be lightweight, subtle, value-added things, not in your face, loud.
And they'll be open source.
And then open source, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Love that.
Nice. Well, I don't know. Do you have any other questions, Will? I got one last one.
That was it for me.
All right. I got one super important one. Wrap up the show here. Guys, is 2025 the year of desktop Linux?
No. God, no. God,
wow.
We only have like 30 days.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because every more and more people are, and the people who want to get into it are getting into it, and they are finding fewer and fewer blockers for them as time goes on, and that's the thing that excites me. I don't know when we're going to convince Adobe to release Photoshop on Linux or any of that kind of stuff, but I do know that for me, it has been years since I needed to go to Windows. And it used to be the case where, and it still is the case in some countries, like in South Korea, you have to use a specific browser so that your banking works because they have some extension that only works in Edge or even Internet Explorer. But it's been a long time since a browser has said, you cannot run this application, you can't run this website on Linux. But I remember that happening all the time. It's been a long time since a program that didn't have kernel anti-cheat couldn't in some way be run on Linux. I don't know when we're going to convince the anti-cheat developers to consider how they're going to deliver online games on Linux. But with all of the developments happening in Linux gaming, I'm sure it's coming up soon that someone's going to want to capture the market share. You've got the Steam Deck, you've got the Steam Machine, Steam Frame. They're all running Linux, and they're all running Wayland. And so having that kind of capture has been really good.
I think I'd answer it in a different way. It's already here, just most people don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Look, the number of people I've had ask me about running Linux this year has gone up faster than any other year. I think it's a real mishmash of Microsoft kind of dropping the ball in a lot of ways for a lot of their users, and also everybody's been running. People who play games have been running Steam Decks for the last 5 years, 3 years now, and are like, oh, I kind of understand this now. I have a foothold, and once you have that foothold, everything becomes possible. I think, which opens the door to a lot of other stuff. Anyway,
Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us. I appreciate it. Good luck on the launch. I'll be trying and checking it out as it goes along as well. So
I'm going to go to
Awesome.
I'm going to go to Git and GitHub and thumbs up that, hey, make the tiling window manager scrolling feature request.
Perfect.
There
The
we go.
more interactions on GitHub, the better. Because even if it doesn't make it into the first release, we really want this is a desktop environment for everybody. And it's not we are going to pick and choose what features we think are useful. It's we're going to evaluate what features people want and then see how we can integrate them, whether it's scrollable tiling or accessibility or, oh my gosh, so many things I've had to add to the file manager and will continue to have to add. These are things that simply have to be there. And I don't want to ever say to anybody no.
We actually watch those thumbs ups, and we'll organize issues by the thumbs up so we can get a feel for how many people are looking for a feature. So that those things matter.
Do you all collect metadata from people who are using the OS as well? So you see how
No.
they're actually using it? Okay. I assume.
And, in fact, our sync feature is going to be done in a way that all of the user data is encrypted on the device. So the only thing we'll be tracking on our side per account are size quotas. And that's just for billing purposes. So we really develop Pop! OS and Cosmic with privacy in mind. We don't collect anything from the user by default. And we have a privacy policy that lists through all of the things that we do collect. And it's very minimal. Like we have a endpoint just for doing network detection. And that endpoint is, it just returns the right error code, like a 204 error. And that's all it does. We have the apt repositories that don't collect any data whatsoever. And sometimes I'm like, Carl, how many users do we have? And the only thing we have to go after it is the throughput that we have to pay for from AWS. That's about it. So we have to take that number and try to calculate how many users do we have based on that.
It's amazing.
Okay, nice. Well, hopefully even more with Cosmic. And good luck, guys. Thanks again for stopping by and chatting. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for watching the podcast. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.